Charter schools have fewer rules and regulations than school districts. That's the way things are set up. The extra latitude is supposed to give charters more room to experiment, to try innovative educational methods, different techniques, and there's nothing wrong with that in theory. But the lack of regulation can come at a cost. It means unscrupulous people or people who just don't have the knowledge and experience they need to run a school can abuse the system, and that can cost the taxpayers millions of dollars and put their students at risk. A national study was released recently that takes a look at the problem. The study is called Charter School Vulnerabilities to Waste, Fraud, and Abuse. It was created by two groups, the Center for Popular Democracy and Integrity in Education. Here's a summary of the report's finding. Our examination, which focused on 15 large charter markets, by the way, that's less than half the states with charter schools, it found fraud, waste, and abuse cases totaling over $100 million in losses to taxpayers. Despite rapid growth in the charter school industry, no agency, federal or state, has been given the resources to properly oversee it. Given this inadequate oversight, we worry that the fraud and mismanagement that has been uncovered thus far might be just the tip of the iceberg. The report is filled with examples pulled from news reports from the 15 states. There are about 75 in all. I'm just going to give you a very small sampling. Well, the former CEO of a Minnesota charter school embezzled $1.38 million over 5 years. He bought himself houses, cars, spent some money on trips to strip clubs, while his students lacked funds for field trips, supplies, computers, and textbooks. Remember, since charter schools are taxpayer funded, that's taxpayer money he's stealing. In Florida, the director of a charter school used $750,000 in state funds to prop up a failing apartment complex he owned. In another Minnesota charter, the school inflated its enrollment numbers and received $608,000 in extra money from the state. Arizona has surprisingly few examples on the list. One case is a Chandler charter school where $20,000 was embezzled by filing false invoices for janitorial services and school supplies. Another is a Mesa charter that had to pay nearly $2 million in restitution after inflating the school's attendance numbers. That's about it. Well, it may be that Arizona charters are less subject to cases of fraud and abuse in other states, or it may be that our lax system of oversight allows lots of problems to go unreported. Arizona has a reputation as the Wild West of charter schools, where everything and anything goes. Our state board of charter schools has 8 employees who are supposed to oversee every aspect of the state's 600 charter schools. There's no way 8 employees can know what's going on in 600 schools and correct the problems as they arise. The schools sometimes are run by people who don't have much background in education or in school management. The financial reports they submit to the state are vague and general, so even if the board had the time, it couldn't learn much from going over the numbers. That leaves lots of room for poorly run schools and for people with larceny in their hearts who want to skim money off the top for their personal gain.
Well, Dave, I hate to say it, but this report is absolutely no surprise. And I also hate to say it, but you really think that at some point this is intentional on the part of the state legislature, that they not put in any real oversight because they really don't care. And it's absolutely fine with them. We have state legislators who run their own charter operations, who have been, the leaders in this movement to create in Arizona more charters per capita than any other state in the country. So the fact that we have, 1 regulator for every 75 schools, that's ridiculous.
That sounds close.
And even among the charter school associations nationwide, they've come out with reports saying that Arizona clearly needs more oversight and more regulation. And I think what you suggested is just right, that this, and what the report suggested, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And in Arizona, there are things that go on that are actually legal that we would consider to be fraud. I remember hearing about a case where a charter school operator actually bought a condo in Florida for school field trips. And this was reported to the Arizona Attorney General's office, but there was nothing wrong with that. That was completely allowed under our state's laws.
Well, I know the Arizona Republic, the paper, has run some very, very good stories about the way there are these sweetheart deals between the charter school and people who are parents of kids in the school or people who sit on the board, and they supply the books and they supply the supplies and the janitorial services. And unlike regular districts that have to submit their contracts and go through a bid process, they really don't have to go through a bidding process. So that it encourages the kind of abuse you're talking about. And I do know, looking at the history of charter schools, that here very purposefully they said, let's set up a very, very small group of employees so we can let the invisible hand of the marketplace determine who rises and who falls. But that invisible hand sometimes reaches out and grabs a little bit of money.
That's exactly right.
Well, I didn't mention it when I was talking about the report, but the report does have some recommendations. And one is, obviously, you have to adequately staff and fund charter school boards. You can't have 8 people looking over 600 schools. And remember, this isn't schools within school districts that all fall under one umbrella. Each one is often an individual school. You have to have independent audits, it says. You have to have charter applications and agreements, board members, and all that's got to be online. Everything's got to be listed. And you've got to disclose all vendor or service contracts that are over $25,000. You can't simply farm them out to people. And finally, it says, I don't know how much people know about the boards that govern charter schools, but they're often set up with the owners and the owners' families and friends and things of that nature. They said no. The charter schools boards have to have educators and parents on them, educators at the school, parents at that school. No relatives of administrators can be sitting there. They have to hold regular public meetings, and they have to publish the minutes online. In other words, more transparency.
Well, wouldn't this all be nice? And it's actually pretty ridiculous that it doesn't happen, because when you're talking about public district schools, all of those things happen.
Sure.
And just mentioning the audits, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that the State Auditor General's office does not audit charter schools. Basically, if you're a charter school operator in the state of Arizona, you get to submit an independent audit. Independent could be done by your cousin, which in many cases it has been done by a family member, and the state just signs off on it. So the only way that fraud or abuse gets reported typically is if you have some sort of a whistleblower. It's not being caught by the state as it goes through financial reporting records, which makes absolutely no sense. You know, all of these charter, I wouldn't say, well, people who push charter schools are all about, you know, how wasteful, you know, regular government is, and they tend to be anti-government, anti-tax. They refer to public schools as government schools, and the private market is so much better. Well, why then will you not subject the private market to the exact same requirements that we subject the traditional neighborhood schools to? I mean, what's with the double standard?
You know, regulation, you know, has a bad name, and good guys don't need regulation. You know, the good guys are doing it themselves, and they get upset. You know, why do I have to fill out all this stuff? But it's for the bad guys and the lazy guys and the incompetent guys. And if you don't have regulation, those 3 groups of people are simply going to be slipping through the cracks and doing stuff that either is unintentionally wasteful or sometimes fraudulent.
Well, and I think the legislature is intentionally making it easy for the fraud and schemers to get away with it. And that's very unfortunate if you really consider yourself to be a steward of state taxpayer dollars.
That's true.